Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from Engerward Shirase. When you released this video, meaning last week's video, the UK had just had its general election. What are your thoughts on the result? Also, would you have voted for Lord Buckethead? To answer the last question first, no, I would not have voted for Lord Buckethead if I were a registered UK voter and I were voting in that election. I would have voted for Theresa May's Labour Party opponent, which was Pat McDonald. And by the way, I did just look that up a minute ago, so don't think that I knew that. I'm really not that engaged. But I guess I was happy with the result in that it was way better than I feared it would be. I mean, all of the polls, even though Labour had been trending upward for the weeks leading up to the election, most of the predictions were still that the Tories were going to win and were going to increase their majority. So to have Labour do as unexpectedly well as it did, to have Labour make so many gains that the Conservative Party actually did not get a proper majority, and you wound up with a hung parliament. I mean, that's more than I expected. That's more than I dared hope for. So I guess I'm pleased with the election. Obviously, it would have been better if Labour had won an outright majority. It would be better if there was a Labour Prime Minister to replace Theresa May. That did not happen. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. But I guess I have to take what I can get. We have to call that a win. We have to call that a cause to celebrate. And we have to use it as motivation to do more and to do better next time, which is the important bit. W. Mark Locker, Steve, and you had to ask number 244, you stated that you thought Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were overrated because they do not speak to you. I admit I've had problems with getting something out of them too at first, but for me it was just the English writing style that I found difficult to decipher. Most English writers, and especially any written works that go a couple or more centuries back, seem to use a different mechanics in conveying their message that I seem to have a hard time understanding the message. Do you experience this with any written works? Oh, very much so. And you're right. The further back in history where the piece originated, the more of an adjustment will have to be made. And the most obvious example that is the bane of public school students throughout the English-speaking world, and I would have to guess especially here in the United States, where we value a very informal type of English, would be Shakespeare. I mean, what American public school student has not struggled to comprehend, much less appreciate, Shakespeare when encountered for the first time? It reads almost like a completely different language. You almost have to approach it as though it's not English, because it is so far removed from the English that we encounter every day today in our modern era. But once you make that adjustment, and for me, it took me a while to make that adjustment. It took me a very long time. And I was an English student, and I was motivated, and I wanted to see what the big deal was with Shakespeare. It took me a while to make that adjustment to where I could read Shakespeare and I could just understand what he was saying. I could understand what he was trying to communicate at a basic level, without having to go back over it 2 or 3 times and really deconstruct it and think about it. It was a challenge. And if you can learn to do that and you hang in there and you get that skill, then it can be an incredibly rewarding experience to read and study those works. But it is unfortunately an insurmountable barrier for a lot of people. But there's really nothing you can do about that. You know, so a wiser person than I once said that the past is written in a foreign language. And the further back into the past you go, the more foreign your own native language will sound to you. And that's sort of the situation that you're in when you're reading those old classic works of English literature. Alex Personius, with so much talk about the Paris Accord, I decided to read it for myself. I could find very little to support in that the mechanisms are not defined clearly and the major polluters were not pledging action until 2030. Did I miss something that you saw in your reading? The Paris Agreement is more laudable for what it represents than for what it would probably actually accomplish. It represented for the first time the entire world, or virtually the entire world, coming together and saying climate change is real, it's a problem, and we need to do something about it. And then to have Trump come out within the first few months of his presidency and say, nope, 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 is just very discouraging and very disappointing and very alarming because, as you say, the Paris Agreement, there's not an enforcement mechanism. It doesn't really have any legal weight. I think the signatory countries are pretty much allowed to set their own schedules and set their own goals. I mean, it's very, very loose as it is. And for Trump to look at that agreement and say, no, we can't do that. That's too onerous. That'll kill jobs. When the agreement gives the member nations such wide latitude in setting their own goals, and there's not really any mechanism in there to punish them if they fail to meet those goals. So for Trump to look at the Paris Agreement and say, nope, we're not going to do that, it kind of rules out any far more serious climate agreements, in the future. It's basically Trump saying, the reason, I'll boil it down. The reason why Trump pulling out of the Paris Agreement is so devastating to a lot of people is because it is Trump saying in so many words, as long as I am president, and indeed as long as my party is in charge of things around here, we're not going to do shit about climate change. We don't care about it. We don't think it's a serious issue. We're going to treat it like an imaginary problem, and that's just the way it's going to be. And that is a huge, huge problem for a lot of us. Rotting in the Midwest. Steve, I'm sure you witnessed at least some of the spectacle that was John McCain questioning former FBI Director James Comey in congressional testimony. Later on, McCain gave an excuse for his bizarre behavior, saying that maybe going forward, I shouldn't stay up late watching the Diamondbacks night games. Is it fair for a politician to blame baseball for their shortcomings? If you were to do something similar, would you blame the Orioles or the Nationals? Well, I've always been more of an Orioles fan. I mean, I wish the Nationals nothing but the best, but they're a much more recent team. So I'm an Orioles fan, born and raised. So yes, if I were going to blame the fact that I just made a complete ass out of myself as a United States Senator on national television in a very important congressional hearing on baseball, I suppose I would have to blame it on the O's, not on the Nats. But it's not an excuse. It's a pathetic excuse. A United States Senator, especially one as experienced and as much of a veteran as John McCain is, should not be sort of shrugging off things like that with jokey little half-ass excuses. Like, yeah, I guess I was kind of going off in a weird direction there. I'm sorry, I was up late watching the ball game. Like, you're a senator, dude. And not only that, McCain is one of those guys that people always point to in the Republicans as, he's the maverick. He's going to be a reformer. He's one of those Republicans. He's an honest Republican. He's going to hold his party's feet to the fire. And indeed, whenever a Republican does something that is like incredibly egregious, when Trump does something that is just so outrageous that it can't really be denied unless you want to just go ahead and say, I'm a party shill, I don't care, like most of the Republicans on Capitol Hill, McCain will croak out some weak, half-assed objection to what Trump did or said and say, such actions are beneath the dignity of the office of the White House. But he doesn't do anything about it. He doesn't ever back up his words with actions. He never puts his money where his mouth is. So McCain is worthless, like all the Republicans in the Senate and the House of Representatives. They're completely fucking worthless. They sit there while Trump makes a mockery of the office, while he engages in flagrant corruption, while he obstructs justice, while he benefits from these conflicts of interest between his office and his business, while he pisses off the rest of the world and the Republic and lies his ass off. Not just to the people, not just to the press, but to their faces. When he says to his cabinet, I'm the most successful president in the modern era. I've passed more legislation than any other president. And they know that's bullshit. Every person in the room when he says that knows that that is bullshit. And what do? Good job, Mr. President. And the same thing happens in the Senate, and the same thing happens in the House of Representatives. They're all fucking worthless. They're a bunch of coward chicken shit party men, and you can't count on them for anything in terms of bringing Trump to justice and getting to the truth about the Comey firing and the Russia investigation. None of them are trustworthy. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. And McCain is in that group. Patrick Dodds, Steve, you said Voyager was your least favorite Trek series. Does that mean you think Enterprise is better than Voyager? If so, could you give us the rationale behind that assertion? For me, I found Voyager to have a stronger cast of actors and characters and the occasional episodic gem, where Enterprise bored me to tears so much that it's the only Star Trek show I've not watched all the way through. Is Enterprise worth my time? I don't know. The reason why I say Enterprise is better is, first of all, Scott Bakula, Scotty Bax. That gets a lot of credit for me because I'm a huge Scott Bakula fan. I'm a Quantum Leap fan from childhood, so I love Quantum Leap and I love Scott Bakula. And I just give the show a lot of slack because Scott Bakula is on my television screen when I'm watching the show. My problem with Voyager wasn't that, and having just watched Voyager again straight through, on Netflix relatively recently, just in the last couple of months, I have a fresh view of it. Voyager was not awful from week to week. The problem with Voyager was that it reached this level of what I call perfectly acceptable Star Trek, and then it almost never went beyond that. And the few times when it did go beyond that, when it did manage a really standout episode, nothing that happened in the episode had any effect on anything in the show. There was an episode of Enterprise or Voyager relatively late in the run, I think like season 6, and it was the episode where they make contact with the Alpha Quadrant for the first time. Like they come up with a way that they can send regular messages from Voyager lost in the Gamma Quadrant or lost in the Delta Quadrant to Starfleet. And there's a moment where the Starfleet staff back on Earth is talking to Captain Janeway and the crew of Voyager on the bridge, and they're saying, "We didn't forget about you, we're looking for you and we're going to bring you home." And that moment works. That is such a powerful moment. And then the next episode, it's like it never happened. Nobody even mentions it. Nobody acts any differently. Nothing in the story is affected by what happened in the previous story. There's not so much as a line of dialogue about the fact that now they have a regular way to contact Starfleet. Now they finally, after 6 years, have this lifeline. It changes nothing. And that was a problem for me, especially coming off of Deep Space Nine, the Star Trek show that did that better than any of the other series. It really mastered that ability of actions have consequences, characters change, the status quo is not set in stone. Things can change in big ways. Voyager had a great opportunity to do that with its Lost on the Other Side of the Galaxy premise, and it just never even remotely tried to do that. So that's why I rank Voyager as at the bottom. Joshua Purvis, hi Steve, my question is, what do you think of the new Mummy movie? Do you think it's good? And what do you think of their new Dark Universe? I haven't seen the new Mummy movie. I don't plan to see it. But as far as Universal's plans for a new, what they call the Dark Universe, their new version of the movie, the Universal Monsters universe, I mean, they're doing it the Marvel way. I just think that's the wrong way to do it. I think if they want to get the shared universe thing, to get their own version of what the MCU has over at Marvel Studios, they can do it, but they can do it the same way that Universal did it the first time. Just make a really good Mummy movie that people want to see. Don't put anything in it about like world building or putting it into some larger context or introducing characters that will come into the next movie. Like, don't do the Marvel thing where like Russell Crowe is apparently like going to be the Agent Coulson who's going to show up in different movies. Just don't do any of that. Just make a really awesome kick-ass Mummy movie. And then 2 years later release a really awesome kick-ass Frankenstein movie. And then a Dracula movie. And then a Wolfman movie. And then an Invisible Man movie. Just make really awesome horror movies featuring these classic monsters that people will like, that people will get behind, that people will enjoy, and then do Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. And don't set it up. Just do it. Just make a movie where your Frankenstein meets your Wolfman. They're in the same movie. They have an adventure together. They fight or they unite against a common enemy or whatever. Just do that. Don't set it up painstakingly from first step to second to third. Don't do the Marvel thing. The Marvel thing works for Marvel, but that's not the only way to do it. NYC guy, hello Steve, you may have addressed this issue already, but here it goes. Do you think inherited wealth is a legitimate form of wealth? Do you think the idea of inheritance is an issue that we as a democracy as well as a species has to debate? Do you believe the very medieval concept of an estate needs to be abolished? I wouldn't take it that far. I don't think we need to do away with estates or inheritance. I think if you own something, you should be within your right to pass that something down to someone else. I think you should be able to say, when I go, so-and-so gets this. And I don't have a problem with that idea. But when you're talking about large amounts of money, when you're talking about a great deal of wealth being passed from one generation to the next, I have no problem with taxing the shit out of it. I am completely in favor of estate taxes and inheritance taxes. I don't think that there's anything wrong with the government garnishing someone's estate after they pass away for the good of everybody, to fund social programs, to fund education, to do those sorts of things before it goes down to the people who are to be the heirs. I don't think that you should take everything. I think a healthy percentage would be nice, but I don't think you need to get rid of the estate concept or say you can't, no more inheritances. I don't support that. But taxing inheritances, taxing estates as they are passed from one generation to the next very, very heavily, I'm completely in favor of that. Joe McClory, I was given a camo hoodie for Christmas last year and I haven't worn it because I don't like camo. Not long after, I was watching something about addressing our biases to keep them from informing our actions without us noticing. Well, I realized a part, maybe a big part of me not liking camo is, in my mind, I connect it with people whose ideas I disagree with a lot. I wonder at how often I prejudge some subcultures of mostly white people because many of their most vocal members spew forth a lot of shitty ideas. What steps do you take to separate the people from the ugliest ideas of some subcultures? The main thing I try to remember to do is to treat individuals as individuals when I meet them or when I encounter them for the first time. And by that, I don't mean assume that they haven't been influenced at all by their culture or by their surroundings. What I mean is try not to put any of those stereotypes on them at the very beginning. If you meet a white dude who is like a big NASCAR fan, don't assume before you even talk to the guy that he's going to be some racist, redneck, misogynist, beer drinking, hates Black Lives Matter, loves Donald Trump kind of guy. Just take him at face value, accept him as you find him and talk to him like that. And it doesn't mean that you go in assuming that he hasn't been touched by any elements of his culture. It just means you treat him as an individual and you sort of, again, you take him as you find him. I think that's something that's only fair to do to everybody. It doesn't mean you don't judge people by their actions. It doesn't mean if someone says or does something racist that you let them off the hook, or you assume that they just came by it completely, on their own, and that they weren't influenced in some way by some pre-existing cultural bias. It just means that, you give people the benefit of the doubt at first, you treat them as individuals, and you take them as you find them. I don't know. It's tough sometimes, but it's a good trick. Hey, here's another good trick. I'm going to make this part of the video disappear, and I'm going to go to the next part of the video, because it's time for the lightning round. Corey Donaldson, do you like eating seafood, as in lobster and crab? Well, I'm a vegetarian now, so I haven't had any lobster or crab for a while, but I'm from Maryland. We're fed crab from the moment we're born. You have to eat crab when you're a Marylander. Yes, I have eaten crab many, many times, and I love crab. Lobster I enjoy, but I haven't gotten it as much. And also shrimp. We're a big crab and shrimp folk around here in Maryland. Ahoyerno, have you ever gone to naturist places like campings or clothing optional beaches? What's your opinion on the experience or lack thereof? I have never gone. I have no objection to anybody who does. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's never been anything I've been remotely interested in. But if it's your thing, if people like going to clothing optional retreats or whatever. If that's what they enjoy, I say more power to them. Good for them. They should be allowed to do it, and they shouldn't be looked at sideways for doing it. You know, good for them. Lucas Hackett, hey Steve, Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger? Who do you think would win in a rematch? Oh, Freddy. Jason falls asleep, you know, Freddy creeps into his dreams and he hacks him. He hacks the fuck out of him. I mean, is Jason? That's what I didn't really dig about the Freddy versus Jason movie, is that, you know, I mean, just, is Jason unkillable in his dreams too? Freddy shows up and he hacks him up in his dreams. End of fight. You know, Jason takes a nap and it's over. Yeah, Freddy. Matt Machado, hey Steve, I have a few relatives who are religious, and at family gatherings they insist on not only saying grace before meals, but they expect everyone else to hold hands and say grace with them. Should I refuse and possibly make a scene, or just go along with it? Have you been in any situation like this? I have never had to hold hands, but I do have members of my extended family who say grace before practically every meal, and we don't hold hands, and we're not all expected to say it along with everybody, but it is said, and when that happens, I sort of bow my head and sit quietly until it's over. Like, I don't get up from the table or make a scene or anything. I just sit there and let them do what they need to do, and then we go on with our business. You know, we go on with our meal. I would recommend you try something like that. I mean, if they want to hold your hand and you're comfortable with that, you know, just hold their hand, bow your head, but just don't say it. Just don't mouth it along, you know? If anybody gives any shit about it, just say, look, I don't even believe in this crap. I'm just doing this to be nice. I'm doing this to be polite. Don't give me shit for trying to be polite. I'm not going to say grace if I don't believe what I'm saying, but I'll hold your hands. I'll be quiet. I'll bow my head. I'll sit respectfully while you do what you need to do, but I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm trying to be nice here. Like, try something like that. And let me know how that goes. Vitamin W, during the Late Seating podcast, do you ever call your co-host DWAD? No, because Jason with a D, technically speaking, is not my co-host. We now know from the recent episodes of Opinionville that Jason with a D is the one who lives in Opinionville, who is the acting mayor and the creator of the show, and also ostensibly my co-host on the fine Late Seating podcast, is actually Jason with a J. So I'm going to have to stop calling him Jason with a D. Technically, it's actually Jason with a J that I've been working with all this time. Who knew, right? I mean, all this time. Shadowman4710. Okay, Shives. Now that Gotham has just wrapped up its third season and will be having a fourth, are you now willing to renounce your rational, logical, and skeptical ways and embrace the insane lunacy that is the best DC show on television? I would stop far short of calling it the best DC show. I think that Flash and Supergirl are superior to Gotham in every way. And I love Arrow and I love Legends of Tomorrow too. I just don't get to watch those as much. But the CW shows to me are far above anything that Gotham is doing or has done. But I do really like Gotham. And you're right, it is completely goofy and silly and just, it's so bad it's good. And the more over the top and silly it gets, the more I enjoy it. So I have really enjoyed it. Just give me a good scene of the Penguin just swinging for the fences and chewing the scenery, and I'm good. You know what I mean? So I do really enjoy Gotham. I would not say it is the best DC show, but I have accepted it, and I love it for what it is, which is an absolutely bonkers hour of television. And if I had any critique for it, I would wish that it would be even more bonkers. Radical Bacon, what are your feelings on nuclear power? I wish we would invest in other forms of power. I think it's better to invest in cleaner, renewable forms of energy like wind and solar. I don't think that nuclear power is the future, because I think the downside to it, if something goes wrong, if there's an accident, is just so catastrophic that, I mean, I don't blame people for saying, no, you're not building a nuclear power plant near my town. That's, no. What if that fucker melts down? We're all, you know, it'll be a huge disaster. We'll be dealing with the consequences for decades. So, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of it, because I think that the downside potential of it is so far down there, like, is so bad. It's a lot. I think as long as everything works, and as long as you can come up with a safe place to put the waste when you're done with it, then I think it's preferable to oil and coal and, you know, fossil fuel type power generation. But I mean, I'd much rather invest in solar and wind personally. Secular Scholar, hey Steve, Warnog or blood wine? I mean, I guess if I had to choose, not having had either one, I would choose blood wine, because it's more like a party punch. You know, they put that in a big barrel and you just kind of dip your cup in. It's like, you know, open up a barrel of blood wine and have a nice party. So I would go with that. But personally, I would rather just relax with a nice Ractigino. It's just me. I don't really drink the alcohol that much anymore. I like a nice soft drink. Give me a good Ractigino, and I think I'll be fine. That's the last question, folks. That's it, except for the shout out. And the shout out this week, because this is June and this is Pride Month, all of the shout outs this month will be to LGBTQ oriented organizations. And this week is no exception to that. This week, the shout out goes to Unity Coalition, also known as Coalicion Unida. Pardon my atrocious Spanish pronunciation. It is an organization that serves the LGBTQ Hispanic and Latinx community of Southern Florida. As you may have noticed, I am focusing on not only LGBTQ organizations, but LGBTQ organizations that focus specifically on marginalized communities within the already marginalized community of LGBTQ folks. So I have shouted out organizations that focus on helping LGBTQ black folks, LGBTQ Jewish folks, and now LGBTQ brown folks, Latinx or Hispanic folks. And the Unity Coalition is a fantastic organization. It is based in Southern Florida. It is focused on that particular region, but there is a very huge, very diverse, very wonderful, exciting Latino and Hispanic community down there, and the interests of LGBTQ folks within that community need to be served. Those folks need to be spoken up for. They need to have an equal seat at the table. They need to have people who will advocate for their rights and for their fair, just, humane treatment within their local communities. And I think organizations like Unity Coalition are doing fantastic work, and they're very worthy of some more attention and a shout out, and maybe some financial assistance or some volunteer assistance if you are in a position to do that. So you can go to the website of Unity Coalition, which is unitycoalition.org, for more information on this awesome, awesome organization. That is the shout out this week. I also want to remind you, as I always do around this time, to give a listen to the Lemme Listen family of podcasts. There's a whole bunch of awesome Lemme Listen podcasts that you can listen to, but the one that I am primarily concerned with in this video is the Fine Fine Late Seating podcast. And the reason is that I'm on that one. That's the one that I'm on. So that's the one I really care about, because I'm selfish and I'm an egomaniac and a preening narcissist. So you can listen to the Late Seating podcast, which is the belated movie review podcast co-hosted by Jason Harding and myself, where we take a fresh look at a film with a great or a terrible reputation. We decide for ourselves whether it deserves that reputation that it has. And we also summarize it and make fun of it and do all kinds of entertaining stuff for your enjoyment. So you can listen to the most recent episode of the Late Seating podcast, and you can get ready for our next episode of Late Seating. The most recent one was about the Fast and the Furious. The next episode is about that classic dog movie, Old Yeller. That'll be the next episode of Late Seating. So go watch that and get ready for that episode coming out next week. And in the meantime, you can listen to all of the past episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the awesome Lemme Listen podcasts by going to LemmeListenPodcast.com. I am done. I am out of here for another week. Thank you all so much, as always, for watching. Please leave a comment on this video to ask me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious, nothing is too silly, but in order for me to do this, you have to ask. So please do leave a comment down below and ask your question. Take care, everybody. I should have said something more there, but I just ran out. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. Thank you again for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.